So that's a few examples of disorders that are caused by an altered number of chromosomes. If we talk about just chromosomal abnormalities with the deletions and duplications and inversions and translocations, there's also a few specific diseases. One is Cruduchet, which is, it's called cry like a cat because children that are born with this, it's a specific deletion of chromosome 5. I think it's the very top of chromosome 5 that pops off and doesn't get replaced. And children that are born with that, when they cry, they sound like a cat. And so it was named Cruduchet. And it's usually children that are born with this die early in childhood, unfortunately. And then there's also a certain cancer that's caused by translocation, so chronic myelogenous leukemia. So leukemia is a cancer of blood cells, and it is caused by this translocation. So it's a translocation between chromosome 9 and chromosome 22, and this chromosome 22 is called the Philadelphia chromosome, so this is how it's diagnosed. But basically you're putting you put one of the clock genes, remember the cyclodependent kinase genes that we talked about? You put one of those clock genes in the wrong place and it gets basically, it's called BCR-ABL. It gets turned on so it's always on, so you have aberrant cell division, and it's associated with a chromosomally based cancer. Okay, and then the last topic that I wanted to talk about before we finish up chapter 15 is situations that are outside of Mendel's laws, because now we're talking about genes that are inherited that are outside the nucleus. You guys remember when we talked about mitochondria? Mitochondria have their own DNA, right? They can divide somewhat independently of the cell dividing. And so you only get mitochondrial DNA from your mom. There are not mitochondria inherited through the sperm. You only get DNA through the sperm, but the egg has the mitochondria in it, and so all the cell divisions that come from your mom are what are providing you with the mitochondria that you have for all the cells in your body. And then there's also a situation that I want to kind of indicate. It's called imprinting. I'll talk about imprinting first. Imprinting is, there are a few genes, there's not that many, there's around 100 genes that have been discovered that undergo a process that's called imprinting. And most of these genes have to do with normal embryonic growth and development. And basically with imprinted genes, you'll get a copy for mom and a copy for dad, but one gene, if it's imprinted for the paternal allele, the paternal allele is the only gene that's expressed in all the cells that you have, and the maternal allele is never expressed. And that would be true of every person in the population. This gene is imprinted as a paternal allele. And then there'll be other genes that are imprinted from the maternal side, where only the maternal version of the allele is expressed. So they don't follow this pattern of dominant, recessive, codominant, and complete dominant. It's just whatever you got from your dad is the one that counts. So it's almost like a sex-linked trait in that way, but they tend to be, they're not on the sex chromosomes, they're on an autosome, but you only express either the maternal or paternal one, depending on which trait it is, but it'll be maternal for the whole population and paternal for the whole population. And they did a bunch of experiments to figure this out. It's kind of cool, but I didn't bring those up because we won't have time to go over them. Do I want to cover this? No. This is basically how they discovered it. Where only the allele inherited from the father counted. You got the allele from your mom. Only like that was totally silent. It didn't matter if it was dominant or recessive. Only the allele from the maternal source counted, and that's how they discovered it. So other than that, don't worry about it. Again, a small fraction. Most of them are critical for embryonic development. So if you look back to the previous slide, it was an IGF, insulin growth factor gene. And basically, if you got the allele from the dad that was the mutant allele, you would develop as a dwarf because they're important for embryonic growth and development. And the way that genomic imprinting is thought to happen is, remember those cysteine residues that we talked about a long time ago? I'm sorry, not cysteine, methyl residues. Methylation, that little CH3 group. We talked about it early on in the days when we talked about all those little functional groups you could attach to proteins and nucleic acids, and that's how you silence these genes. So the paternal allele, or whatever, if it's a maternally imprinted gene, then the paternal allele is coded in these little methyl groups, and it basically silences it, shuts it off. And then the last kind of non-Mendelian little blurb here is that there are some genes that you find in organelles in cytoplasm, specifically for humans, it's mitochondria. Plants have those separate genes in both And they have their own little, DNA molecules can replicate somewhat independently from the cell itself. All of those extranuclear genes in humans come from the mom because all of the mitochondria are provided by the egg. And the way that they found this actually came from the plant world, where they basically found some genes in plants where you had these multicolored plant leaves. That's because of different genetics of the plastids. The chloroplasts might have their own special DNA. But in the way that it affects humans is that if you have mitochondrial myopathy, which is, you can imagine that if you have defective mitochondria, it's going to affect your musculature because you need mitochondria in order to constantly contract muscles. And so you can get mitochondrial myopathy, which is a muscle weakness. And then there's also hereditary optic neuropathy, which is also a mitochondrial encoded gene, but it results in a sudden rapid onset of blindness. And again, that is inherited through your mother. And so you have to think about mitochondrial diseases being passed down by the mother exclusively, not coming from the father. So if your father has a mitochondrial disease, you should be okay. If your mother has one, you should be concerned. And this goes back, just a little aside, you don't have to know this for testing purposes, but this goes back into the idea of having a three-parented offspring. I don't know if you've heard this. They just did this in England. They have a healthy birth that technically came from three parents. So mom has a mitochondrial disease, it's mitochondrial myopathy. And so what they do is they take the DNA from one of the mom's eggs. They get an egg donor. So you get an egg donor with healthy mitochondria. So here's our donor, and here's the healthy DNA in the mitochondria from the donor. You take the nucleus out of the donor. Okay, so now there's no nuclear DNA, there's mitochondrial DNA. You insert, here's the mom. This is the red is the donor, blue is the mom. You insert a nucleus from an egg from the mom. So now we have DNA from the mom. We took out the nucleus of her egg, and we discarded the defective mitochondria that's in her egg. And then we fertilize it with sperm from the father. So technically, there's 3 sets of DNA. There's mitochondrial DNA from the donor, which granted is a relatively small percentage, and then nuclear DNA comes from the mom and the dad. So it's controversial because it's like, oh, we've got 2 parents here. What's going on? Does this person have any parental rights or responsibilities? Is this too crazy? But if you have a mitochondrial defect, it's a pretty solid way of ensuring that your defective traits are eliminated, but your actual nuclear DNA can be transmitted. So they actually have a live birth that happened using this technique. It's not allowed here. So, yes.
What happens if 2 egg cells meet?
Nothing.
Just talk.
Just hey, what's going on? How's your day? Yeah. Okay. So that's the end of chapter 15. Do you guys have any questions about any of that material? Because the test comes up on Thursdays. It's a quick turnaround. Usually we have a class in between.